Hello. We are providing this presentation in order to give you the necessary context around method teaming so that when one of our certified instructors meets with you to go through your profile in detail, you'll have the context you need to be able to put your particular profile into perspective. There's a lot of words on this slide, but really it's here to communicate one thing to you, and that is that method teaming is a science, a language, and a methodology for creating mission-perfect teams using intellectual diversity. That's what we're after, mission-perfect teams. This is the method teaming icon. It's here to communicate several things to you. Number one, that method teaming, as we said, is a language, but it is a very simple language. There are only 4 words in the language, and you're looking at the 4 words: EQ, PD, strategist, networker. If you have a fundamental understanding of these 4 words, then you can speak method teaming with anybody else in the organization. This is also here to communicate to you that it is a map, with up being north and down being south. And somewhere on this map, there is a pinpoint that your particular intellect resides at. And before you're done with your instructor who's going to provide your debrief, you'll know precisely where that dot is located and why it is where it's located. These are also the 4 primary intellects that we identify in method teaming, and every human being has a primary intellect. Now, some people have a secondary intellect that's almost as strong as their primary, and some people's secondary intellect is distant from the primary. Having it one way or the other is not better or worse, it simply is. Now I'd like to take you through the quick definitions of each of the 4 intellects, starting with our friends, the PDs. Now, the PDs make up 55% of the business population, and the PDs occur in 3 different tribes. Now, we'll be going through the tribes with you only to the extent you are a PD and you happen to be one of the tribe members. Then we'll take you through the definition of your particular tribe. The majority of PDs, the significant majority, are introverted, but there's a sizable minority that are extroverted. Now, PDs are all about getting it done and doing it right. And they're very driven to this. They want to get the job done, and they want to get there correctly. They want to do it in the right way, drawing on all their methodology, their knowledge, their systems, their processes that have proven themselves over the years to that PD. Because they're so focused on getting the job done and finishing it correctly, they tend to be logical, analytical, and precise, because lack of precision yields risk, and PDs do not like risk. They want to eliminate it if they can, mitigate it if they can't. PDs love structures such as systems, procedures, rules, knowledge bases, processes, methodologies, because one presumes we created these structures to yield repeatable success, and PDs are after repeatable success. They are the best technical listeners of all 4 intellects, meaning they pick up a higher percentage factually of what's being said in any given room. Now, they're not the best active listeners. That belongs to a different intellect. PDs are organized and disciplined, and their office space usually reflects this unless they're compulsive about data or knowledge, in which case their office space can be quite cluttered with sources of data and knowledge. Some PDs like solving problems, and some do not. Some PDs believe that the problems we face in the now dimension are nothing more than the debris of not having done a good enough job of creating the system or the plan, and their objective is to create a more perfect system or plan. On a depth of knowledge scale that goes 1 to 10 foot deep, PDs want to get 10 foot deep usually. And if they can find the 11th degree of knowledge somewhere in the world, they'll go find that as well. PDs finish what they start. PDs get work done. If we didn't have PDs in the world, we'd still probably be back in horse and buggy days. PDs get work done. They thrive in complexity, but they usually do not like ambiguity. They're definitely the engineers of the business world. They think a lot about how. How do I go from point A to point B in the surest possible path using the structures that have proven themselves to me? Now, when you think about PDs, you're going to think of a few people you know that seem to embody every single one of these strengths and attributes. But you're going to think of actually more people you know who have most of these strengths and attributes, but certainly not all. And that is very common in method teaming because people are complex. And every pattern of an exception to these strengths can be found. Every pattern. And just when we think we've seen every pattern of exception in an individual, along comes a profile the next day that makes us realize that the variations in these exceptions are almost limitless. Let's talk about networkers. Networkers make up 20% of the business population, and they operate on two fundamental words, off of two fundamental words or notions. One is trust. A networker will work very hard to earn your trust. They want to earn it. And trust is also the only way a networker will ever accept any information from you or buy anything from you, and that is if they trust you. There is absolutely no shortcut for that with a networker. Empathy is the other key word for networkers, and empathy we define very simply as somebody who will naturally and reflexively help others before they help themselves. You must have empathy to be a networker in method teaming. Now, there's a fraction of PDs, strategists, and EQs that have empathy, but all networkers have empathy. Networkers are gifted at creating, sustaining, and nurturing relationships. That is as easy for them as is managing great complexity is for a PD. It comes naturally to them. They would rather influence you over to their way of thinking rather than persuade you. We said that PDs are the best factual listeners, technical listeners. That's true. But networkers are the best active listeners, meaning when they listen to you, you can see them listening, hear them listening, and even feel them listening. And that feels good to us human beings, so we tend to tell the networker more than we'll tell anybody else, particularly because they have earned our trust. So networkers are always going to be the best informed people in any organization, and they're absolutely essential in doing any form of change management. If you can get the networkers on your side when doing change management on any project, you have a much higher success rate than if the networkers are against you. So identifying them early and getting them on the side of the initiative, getting their help, getting their trust is essential. Now, they are gifted at reading nonverbal communication. And this is really important because if you've ever had a chance to study the technical literature on communication, the most frequently quoted statistic as to what part of communication is nonverbal is 93%. 93%. And the networkers are the masters of that 93%. They read it like a book. Now, can they teach you how to do it? Absolutely not. Can they write a methodology and teach others how to do it from that? No, they can't. It's just something they were born to be able to do. Guarding the flanks of the team on the people dimension. This is something networkers are very good at. Those PDs that we mentioned, look, they're probably not going to make a mistake on the technology dimension. And they most likely will not make a mistake on the process dimension. But they're prone to making very large mistakes, project-killing mistakes, on the people dimension very commonly. And it's the networkers that will see those mistakes begin to occur from a mile away. And the networkers can work around the flanks of the PDs and diffuse those people dimension problems before they become big project killer problems. The networkers are very good at that, and that's why you need a networker on any implementation team. They're pretty good with politics, no problem. They're very good at managing and setting expectations and perceptions in the organization. Sometimes they'll seek out informal leadership from whence they can influence rather than having to persuade. They think on the who dimension, so they believe that if you get the people dimension right in life, you will probably succeed. And if you get the people dimension wrong, you almost certainly will fail. The EQs make up 17% of the population, and they're extroverted virtually without exception. Meaning, by extroverted, we mean that they take energy from being around people. Their energy level goes up, not down. Those PDs, most of them are introverted. When they're around people, they may do very well around people, but their energy level is depleted when they're with people. Then they need to be in solitary activities in order to recharge their batteries. But these EQs, they're extroverted. Now, EQs love to win. They are very comfortable in a competitive contest where there'll be one winner and all other players will be losers. And by God, if I'm an EQ, I'm going to make it my business to be the winner. Many of them gravitate to the sales part of an organization, but certainly not all. You'll find a smattering of EQs in every part of the company. When they are in sales, though, they are very good at the beginning of the sales process and very good at the end, but not as good in the middle. In the middle, the client is looking for depth of content, best delivered by a PD, or depth of relationship, best delivered by a networker, and sometimes depth of creativity, best delivered by a strategist. But when working the front and the back of a sales process, EQs are exceptional. They are fast-driven people. They want to move quickly. They have a big foot on the accelerator pedal of life and no foot on the brakes. They're very good at multitasking. That comes naturally to them usually. And it varies between EQs as to how many major tasks they like to have on their plate at once, but it's almost always 2 or more. They're very good at communicating in quick, powerful sound bites because they are people moving in a hurry. They're the best communicators, the most articulate. Now, and that probably fuels a disproportionate number of EQs becoming CEOs. There's 17% of the business population, but we estimate 50% of CEOs. Now, when the board gets tired of that EQ CEO, they almost always will go to a PD CEO. Now they want a CEO who will underpromise and overdeliver. Invariably, the board will get tired of the PD CEO and they'll go back to the EQ. And in many companies' histories, you can find that pattern of EQ, PD, EQ, PD, EQ, etc. in the CEO ranks. The EQs are very good at separating the wheat from the chaff. And what we mean by that is when an EQ looks at 2 opportunities, their instincts about which one is real and which one is a mirage are deadly accurate. And they will make those decisions, they'll make those judgments with incomplete information, and they will usually be right when it comes to assessing an opportunity that is either an internal opportunity or an external opportunity. They make a strong first impression, which they can't always sustain because they're not going to be deep in knowledge like the PDs. For an EQ to do their job, they only need to be usually 2 or 3 foot deep on that 1 to 10 foot scale. Now, their knowledge base certainly needs to be broader. They have a high tolerance for rejection, and folks, none of the other intellects have this. This separates the EQ from the other intellects. When the other intellects make a mistake or they're rejected, they'll beat themselves up for months. Not so the EQ. If they make a mistake or they're rejected, they're ready to go again in the next half hour. They have a high tolerance for that. They will take a big risk for a big reward. They are fundamentally not interested in incremental improvement, no matter how sure. They're very competitive, and again, they want to win every contest they're in. I'm going to go now to strategist. If you've been keeping track of the math, you'll know that the strategists are the final 8% of people. 8% in most organizations. Now, sadly, half of that 8% in most companies, or 4%, are hiding the very fact that they are a strategist. We'll talk about that more in a moment. But the strategist is the intellect that can give us on-demand creativity and innovation, and they do that through a very interesting but ironic combination of a great strength combined with a great weakness. The great strength they have is they have pattern recognition intelligence. And that pattern recognition intelligence shows them, to a strategist, they see patterns that other people simply do not see. And when they follow that pattern in their mind to its logical conclusion, and they articulate that endpoint, other people will hear that and say, wow, that was creative. For a strategist, they see that pattern as clearly as black and white, but they don't see it in black and white. They see it in color. It's almost an evolving set of pictures. Strategists think in pictures, and they think in color. Now, that's the strength that they have. Pattern recognition yields creativity. The weakness that facilitates the strength is they are oblivious to protocols. And I'm talking about all forms of protocols. And that proverbial box we're always talking about as to whether we're thinking inside of it or outside of it, that is a form of a protocol. So it's not as though the strategist sees the box and chooses to think outside the box. They don't see the box at all. Well, if you don't see the box, and yet you do see a pattern leading you outside the box, that is where creativity comes from. Now, they see the flaws in things. They can play things out, 6 or 8 chess moves. And if they see that something's going to fail and they give voice to it, they can frequently be perceived as negative people in the organization. And let me go back and say a word about protocols. I said they're not very good with protocols, and that's true. So if you think of some of the most creative people you've ever known and ask yourself the question, were they blunt spoken? You'll probably answer yourself, yes, they are. And if you ask yourself, do they sometimes say irreverent things or what somebody might refer to the wrong thing at the wrong time? Yes, that's very possible that those strategists will have that characteristic. Because when you're not constrained by protocols, that means all protocols. Now let me tell you, strategists can learn those protocols, but in life they usually have to learn them the hard way, not the easy way. They're unconventional and unpredictable, and the gratification for a strategist is not through simply coming up with the idea, but seeing people react to their idea. And if people are not reacting to their ideas, they get moody and prickly. A great example of that from history is Van Gogh. When people were not getting his art, what did Van Gogh do? He cut off his ear. So that's an example of a strategist getting a bit moody and prickly when people were not listening or seeing his ideas. They dislike details, the strategists, but they will micromanage if they don't trust the PDs around them to take their idea all the way to fruition, to make it scalable, to make it big, to make it realistic. We need PDs to do that. They think on the what dimension, these strategists, so that's the dimension they most enjoy thinking about, is coming up with new whats. Now, 8% of the population, the majority, are introverted, but there's a very big minority that's extroverted. Now, these are the one-liners we ask you to remember about method teaming. The EQs love to win. The PDs love to get it done and do it right. We use this wonderful quote from Da Vinci as for the strategist, and Da Vinci said, to create is noble and to execute is servile. Probably not a very appropriate thing for him to have said, even in his day. The networkers, we use this statement of you can succeed only through people, because that's what the networkers believe. Now this is how we show a team of people in method teaming, with these yellow dots, which we call I dots. Now these 4 people, if they existed, would be pure examples of their intellect, or what we refer to as stone examples. So this PD down here, she has all of those strengths that we talked about in the PD, and she has none of the opposite strengths. If she had those, we refer to them as contraindicators, and those contraindicators will serve to move that dot, push that dot away from the stone position. It'll push it away in this manner. Now, she also has no discernible presence of a secondary intellect. If she had, on the other hand, you will meet these people. They're examples of people with strong secondary intellects. So this PD down here, she's certainly a primary PD. You can see her dot is in the PD space, but she has an exceptionally strong secondary intellect in the strategist intellect. And you can see that that strength of that secondary is strong enough to have pulled her dot from the stone position all the way close here to the strategist border. Now I want you to pay attention to this because this is how the language works. We call her a PD strategist. We call this woman a strategist PD. Now over here we call this person a networker PD. That's how the language works for all of these dots here on the outer ring. In the inner ring, these dots, the language is different. We want you to go back to thinking about this as a map with up being north and down being south. Using that context, this dot right here is a southern EQ. This person here, an eastern strategist. This person, a western networker. And sorry, we had to be different in the language for the last dot. We refer to these people as PD leaders, not northern PDs. Now you know the second tier of our language. Still pretty simple. Now, at the end of this deck, when you receive it, there's also a method teaming instrument key. We're not going to go through this on this particular presentation, but I do want to make you aware that you will be getting a key that will remind you of what all the dimensions on your profile are about. But at this point, I would like to conclude this presentation and say that we're looking forward to having one of us who are certified instructors sit down with you, usually through GoToMeeting or live, to take you through the details of your particular profile, your particular method teaming intellect profile, or MTIP. So we look forward to that opportunity, and we hope you've gotten value from this presentation. Take care.